Good morning and welcome back. So glad that you're joining me on this lovely Monday morning. If you're new to this space, I'm Taisha Lane, a licensed professional counselor, ordained minister, and the founder of Family Ties Christian Counseling, where we believe that healing is possible when biblical truth meets clinical excellence. I'm coming to you with Mental Health Mondays. Mental Health Mondays is an opportunity for you to jumpstart your work week, your school week, or just your week with a word to boost your mental health. Today, we're going to begin talking about breaking the stigma of mental health in the church community. And this episode's title is You're Not Weak, You're Human. I found it critical to tackle this issue today because somebody is struggling, like struggling. You're having a hard time getting out of bed. Your sadness seems to have you in a deep, dark pit. You feel like you've been pummeled by habitual grief, one loss after the other. At this point, you're unable to catch your breath. You look around and it seems like no one is there. You feel alone and no one seems to truly care about what you care about. Because you often feel anxious about life, you're worried all the time, worried about today, catastrophizing about tomorrow. You're stuck in a state of inaction and it's maddening. Maybe this is you, or maybe it's somebody you know. As a believer, it can be hard to admit that we're struggling because sometimes in the church, we don't create space for this to be our Christian human experience. We instead present an image of perfection that puts the reality of most of our lives to shame. After all, should my life be perfect like Jesus? Well, our lives are imperfect, perfectly imperfect, quite flawed. Our greatest dreams have become our worst nightmares. Our hopes have been deferred. The picture that we painted in our minds have become splashed with globs of paint that we never asked for in the design. Life is messy, y'all, and the messiness of life brings with it some challenging feelings and emotions that can feel heavier and weightier than the actual substance of the mess that it seems like we're living in. Some of us are going to church every Sunday carrying this weight, but we push it down, we box it up, put nice clothes on it, and present an image of perfection for those around us because, after all, isn't my life supposed to be perfect like Jesus? I think we have to ask ourselves, what characteristics of Jesus' life are we using to define his perfection? Jesus was perfect, not because his life looked perfect. Jesus didn't have the perfect birth story. Jesus was conceived by a mother who was unwed. He was born in a stable. He took his first breath in the midst of smelly animals. Jesus was born in a messy situation. When Jesus began his earthly ministry, the people who knew him, the folks in his hometown, rejected him. They couldn't see God in him. They couldn't see God in him, so much so that Jesus would die a sinner's death. Jesus' life was not perfect. His life was wrought with a mixture of highs and lows. His life was perfectly imperfect. Jesus is real, perfectly divine, yet perfectly human. And because he was perfectly human, Isaiah 53:3 says that Jesus was intimately acquainted with our sorrow. He was acquainted with our grief. Jesus is not unaware of the human experience and human suffering because he felt what we feel. He felt pain. He felt loss. He felt brokenness. Jesus empathizes with us because he knows what it's like to feel what we feel. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is in a state of suffering. Jesus is feeling all the feels. He's grieving in a state of pain, internal, emotional, spiritual pain. Jesus' soul was grieving him. He's trying to become settled with a reality that feels unsettling. His soul is grieving him to death. And in Jesus' pain, he wants to escape. If this cup could pass from me. Because Jesus was perfectly human, every feeling and emotion that Jesus experienced wasn't perfectly joyous. Jesus felt the feelings that we would characterize as imperfect. Yet the person of Christ calls us to follow him, not into perfect circumstances and situations. He calls us to follow him not in experiencing only pleasant feelings and emotions. Rather, he calls us to follow him despite our imperfections, like Jesus followed the Father. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus invites us to come to him, all who are weary and heavy burdened, and he says, I will give you rest. Throughout Scripture, we're constantly reminded of the human experience, the ups and the downs of life, as well as the emotions that are involved. We see it in the Psalms, in the book of the prophets. We see it with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and here in Matthew 11:28, we're invited to come to him, not as a one and done deal, but whenever we're weary and heavy burdened, and he will grant us rest, for he is living water. He is a well that never runs dry. Jesus' call to come to him is also a call for connection. He calls us to come out of the lies that we've been telling ourselves, come out of isolation to connect with him. Maybe you're like me and the call to come to others doesn't come as natural. Look, I'm naturally an independent introvert who can oftentimes feel like I can do life myself and would rather be by myself. But my way of thinking, feeling, and oftentimes operating flies in the face of what Scripture and faith calls me to. Hebrews 4:15 says that we have a high priest who is able to empathize with our weaknesses. In his humanity, he was tempted in every way, but in his divinity, he did not sin. Understand, Jesus' human experience is a lot like ours. So we get to come boldly to God's throne of grace with confidence to receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Scripture is admonishing us all that the way that we address our human experience is not in isolation. Rather, we address our imperfect human realities through connection with the one who bids us to come. And in him, with him, and through him, we will receive access to what makes our imperfect human circumstances and unpleasant feelings manageable. And when we come to him, we connect with him, we commune with him, his community, his servants, his hands, his feet. We gain rest. Again, I'm Taisha. This is Mental Health Mondays. There's healing in the help, and your help comes from the Lord. See you next week.